Due to the following special program, Celebrity Game will not be seen tonight. It will return next week at its regular time. Stay tuned for the Burns High debate next on 4. In the interest of a better informed electorate, WTVJ is proud to present the first live television debate between Florida's two Democratic gubernatorial candidates, Mayor Haydon Burns of Jacksonville and Mayor Robert King High of Miami. To moderate, WTVJ's news director, Ralph Renning.
Good evening, everybody. 10 years ago this month, in this same WTVJ studio, two men running for the governorship of Florida appeared in the first TV debate in the state's history. That was in 1954. Leroy Collins went on to defeat Charlie Johns in the wake of that program. The historical significance of that broadcast is pointed up by the fact that a kinescope recording of the Johns-Collins debate will be presented to Florida State University on June 8th by Channel 4 to initiate a historical film archives section of the FSU library. Tonight, 10 years later, a new chapter is about to be written into the state's gubernatorial campaigns. This is 1964. We have another governor's runoff primary election. The Democratic nominees are Haydon Burns and Robert King High. This is the first live TV joint appearance of the two finalists. Haydon Burns is 52 years old, was born in Chicago, grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, moved to Jacksonville at the age of 10, attended Duval Public Schools, attended Babson College in Massachusetts. He has served as mayor of Jacksonville for 15 years. In 1961, he was president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Mr. Burns is a business consultant by profession. He ran third among the Democratic governor's candidates in the election 4 years ago. In the May 5th primary, Mr. Burns was the top vote getter. Robert King High is 40 years old, was born in Flat Creek, Tennessee. He attended the University of Miami, graduated from Stetson Law School, was elected mayor of Miami in 1957, has served as mayor for 4 consecutive terms. He's a practicing attorney. This is his first bid for statewide political office. Well, gentlemen, here are the ground rules for tonight's program. Each of you will make an opening statement not to exceed 3 minutes' time. You will be allowed time also for a closing statement. The body of the program will consist of questions and answers. I will pose the questions, either the same question to both of you or individual questions specifically directed. In each case, you'll have up to 1 minute to answer. In the case of the specifically directed questions, the other candidate may have the opportunity to comment after his opponent's answer. This signal is the cutoff of the time limit. We will now proceed in alphabetical order to Mr. Burns with his opening statement.
Well, first, I'd like to express my gratitude to the people of Florida for the some 312,000 votes that was accorded my candidacy in the first primary, a lead of more than 100,000 votes over the second candidate. I'm grateful for this, and I very humbly accept the responsibility that goes with being the candidate of so many people. I have been mayor of Jacksonville for 15 years, serving in a capacity as both chief executive and administrator. The city of Jacksonville does not have a $25,000 a year city manager. Thus, the business aspects of government is directed by the mayor and his 4 colleagues on the city commission. The budget of the city of Jacksonville is $91 million a year and daily requires the services of 4,500 employees. The Jacksonville story of progress, some $325 million of new development in the course of the last 8 years, achieved by cooperation of free enterprise and local government, without new taxes or without increase in taxes, and without federal funds, has been one of the most fantastic stories of the redevelopment of any community in post-war years. It's been applauded throughout the nation and even signally recognized by the Miami Herald as recent as November just passed, with a page and 3/4 of pictorial and complimentary comment. I appeal to the people of South Florida for their continued support, for I truly will be the all-Florida candidate, and I am deeply concerned with the growth problems of every metropolitan area.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. We now turn to Mr. High for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick, and ladies and gentlemen. I urge you who are watching this program tonight to pay close attention to the questions that will be asked each of the candidates and to listen to the answers that each of us gives. Because how we answer these questions, the preciseness with which we answer them, very well may have a great effect on your lives and on the lives of your children. I would ask you to listen to our answers on the problem of taxes, the problem of roads, the problem of which direction the state is going to take in the race question, whether or not we will be a moderate state or whether or not we will have a situation which would put us in the position of having to have federal marshals in here as some of our sister states have. But much more important than that, I believe that when a man asks you for the most sacred possession that you have, and that is that your right to vote, that this man should be perfectly candid, perfectly frank with you in all the questions that you have. And I would say that he should answer without equivocation any question that you ask of him.
Thank you, Mr. High. We'll get on now with the questions. The first one put to both of you gentlemen, and we will alternate the starting order. But starting this time with Mr. Burns, what do you think is the major issue in this campaign, and do you think it should be the major issue?
Well, I think a man's qualifications to provide the leadership that's necessary to meet the problems of the future for the entire state of Florida should be the issue. I don't feel that sectionalism, the fact that a man resides in one area of the state or another, should have any consideration whatsoever. I believe that each candidate should be weighed more on what he has done, what he has proven, rather than what he promises.
Mr. High, what is your answer to that same question?
I think that one of the most vital issues of this campaign is the fair apportionment of our legislature, because without a legislature apportioned so that every man's vote is the same as the next man's vote, then we truly do not have the democratic process as we believe in, and which is the dream, of course, of America. I would think, too, that the kind of man that you are going to entrust your state with is equally as important.
This next question to both of you gentlemen will start with Mayor High. If the President's Civil Rights Bill being debated in the Congress passes in its current form, would you consider this the law of the land for Florida?
If the Congress of the United States passes a civil rights bill, and if the President of the United States signs it into law, I will uphold the law, and I will extend to it whatever support a governor must extend to a federal law. Because to do otherwise would mean defiance of federal law, which could, of course, bring federal marshals into this state, and which would be disastrous if we did. I would prefer to follow the moderate course of our neighbors to the north, such as Georgia and North Carolina, which have followed this kind of moderate course and have enjoyed prosperity and have not had violence in the streets. Because if we did follow this course and violence were to come to our state, our industry would be absolutely ruined.
Mayor Burns, your reply to that question, please.
Well, I think first that a matter of philosophy should be discussed. My philosophy is a protection of constitutional rights of every citizen, protection of right by trial of jury, and not just on the mandate of the Attorney General or the Justice Department, and to be taken into federal court without the right of trial by jury. I believe in the right of free enterprise for any man to invest his money in his business, to be operated at his discretion, to suffer the loss in case of failure, or to enjoy the profits in the instance of success. I do not believe that equal rights can be legislated. I think they can be worked out in harmony by men of goodwill. The situation alluded to by the opponent of trouble in the streets and so forth can be provoked by many things and under many conditions. I observe that New York City certainly has had its share And this is one of the most liberal cities and one of the most liberal states, both legislative-wise and political leadership-wise in the entire nation.
The next question specifically directed to Mayor High. Do you consider yourself a favorite candidate of the Florida Negro voter? Is this a block strength for you?
I don't believe that is a fair statement. I do think that many people in this state believe that I am a fair man. I have stated that I believe in fair treatment for all people. And if, by your statement, you can say that I have handled well a most sensitive problem, and that is race relations, I would then accept it as such. The matter of getting along with each other is a national trouble. We have done it well in this city. We have done it with the conference table and by discussions of our differences rather than in the streets with brickbats and axe handles. And in this regard, I believe that we have done in this city an excellent job. And of course, I would say that this kind of ability would be well for the state of Florida.
That was a specifically directed question. If you have a comment to Mayor Burns to make, you are allowed to do so.
Well, I think that it's only fair to comment that the statistics do not bear out exactly what Mr. High said, but rather they show that something between 85 and 90% of the Negro voters throughout the entire state of Florida voted in a block for my opponent, and that this accounted for nearly 60% of the total vote that he received, even right here in Dade County. And I don't think that you can question the veracity of the supervisors of registration throughout the state of Florida and in Dade County.
Well, Mr. Burns, the next question to you, sir. Do you regard it as wrong for the Negro or the NAACP to have approved of your opponent? If so, why? If not, why have you repeatedly mentioned the fact?
Well, I think it's wrong for any group of citizens to vote a block vote without weighing the problems facing the state, without knowing personally the candidates and their background. Now, my opponent is not known to the Negro citizens throughout the state of Florida, but rather has been accepted by them en masse upon the recommendation of the executive committee of the NAACP. I'm making reference to yesterday's re-emphasized endorsement coming from the Executive Field Secretary Saunders of the NAACP.
Mr. High, you have the privilege of commenting if you care.
Yes, I would like to comment on that. Mr. Burns, as he recalls, in 1959 in Jacksonville, was elected by a block vote. Mr. Burns carried every Negro precinct in the city of Jacksonville, and Mr. Burns is rather inconsistent in his feeling about this. If I get the Negro vote, this somehow is wrong. If he gets it, which, as a matter of fact, kept him in office for a long time, then this is all right. I have demonstrated an ability to bring about racial harmony, and I am proud of that ability, and I would continue this kind of ability if elected to the highest office in this state. There has been no people killed in our streets.
Mr. Rennick, again, Mr. High has distorted the truth and presented as fact that which is a fabrication of his own imagination. In 1959, I was not elected by the Negro vote, though I was very complimented with the vote that I received. If you would take off of any of my elections all of the Negro vote that I received in any campaign, I still would have been a first primary victor. And, of course, this is a framed situation by Mr. High because he knows I do not have the statistics of the 59 election. But I assure him I can have them tomorrow, and though this show will be over, I will have to, if he continues to pursue this approach, to challenge his reputation for truth and veracity.
Mr. High has left the set here for just a moment. He's back now. Do you have a comment? Did you hear what the mayor said?
I will have those statistics just in a few minutes. I did not know the matter would come up, but I have them here.
Well, you brought it up. That's how you knew
yes,
it was coming up.
I have it here.
Well, gentlemen, suppose we move on.
Surely.
Then. For
the
moment, Mr. High.
I understood, Mr. Rennick, when you extended the invitation to this show, that the discussion was to be propounded questions from you and answered by each of the candidates with a 1-minute limitation. I did not know that we were going to get into the same vicious, unfounded attacks as Mr. High has been engaged in so continuously since the first primary.
I think this calls for an answer on my part. From the very day that it became official that Mr. Burns and I were in the runoff for governor, Mr. Burns has marched up and down this state on TV and in the press stating that I am the candidate of the NAACP. And I believe that because of this conduct on the part of Mr. Burns, it needs to be answered. And this is exactly the form, I believe, that should be used to answer these questions. Mr. Burns knows that over in Tampa, I confronted him with a campaign contribution that he had received from the NAACP back in March. His immediate reaction was, "How much did you pay that person to make this contribution to me?" Shortly thereafter, he did admit that he had received the contribution from Dr. Mizell, the past vice president of the NAACP. Now, with reference to the statement I made just a moment ago, here is the Jacksonville, Florida Times Union, April 22nd, 1959. It says, all 21 precincts. Burns carried all the 21 precincts in which Negroes were in the majority of voters by wide margins. The mayor's total vote in these precincts on the basis of unofficial returns was 9,779. His opponent, Mr. Price, drew 700 votes in these precincts.
All right, Mr. High.
May I comment now that I know what he's talking about? I polled in that election something in excess of 26,000 votes. There were 9,000 Negro citizens who voted for me, but you could have thrown all those votes out completely, and I still beat my opponents in the first primary. I did not say that I have not enjoyed the support of Negro voters voting independently, but I have not engaged in block voting through the processes of NAACP. Now, Mr. Rennick, I think we might well go back to the format of the program and proceed to talk about the problems of this state and the programs that both of us offer through our candidacy. There are many problems facing this state: the handling of $1 billion budget, the direction of 45,000 employees, the caring for 40,000 new citizens a month, the providing for senior citizens, the developing of a highway program, the establishment of quality education at all levels. There are many problems to be discussed. Tourism certainly is not the least of the concern of the people in South Florida. And I have a very pronounced and a very adequate program to develop this very important industry. I would like for us to share equal time on these subjects.
I'm trying to do my best, Mr. Burns.
Actually, why Mr. Burns wants to do this, because he was the one that brought up the one-plank platform immediately after the runoff, and now that the shoe's getting a little tight, he wants to go on to other subjects, and I can well understand that.
Could we do that with the permission of both you gentlemen?
I'm anxious to.
This is not the most comfortable seat to be in between the two of you at this stage of the campaign, but I shall try my best. Mr. Burns, it seemed that in the past, when South Florida has not voted for a governor, he has tended to overlook the needs of this section of the state. Mayor High, your opponent, carried Dade County in the first primary. If elected governor, could you assure that this would not influence your actions towards Dade or this part of Florida?
Mr. Rennick, I have served with 7 mayors of Miami. I have cooperated with all of them to the benefit of Miami and the state of Florida. I served 2 years on the advisory committee of Inaroma and 4 years as a member of its 11-man board, making 72 trips in my capacity as mayor of Jacksonville to show concern and goodwill for the prosperity and the progress of Miami. Irrespective of the outcome of the vote, I'm going to be the governor of all Florida, and the need is greatest where the people are. Thusly, Dade and Broward, Palm Beach counties will receive fair and apportionate attention under my administration. You will not be neglected as you have during the courses of certain administrations past.
Any comment, Mr. High?
Yes, I certainly do want to make a comment. The growing counties, such as Dade, Broward, and other counties, have been on the short end of the stick, lo these many years, by a pork-chop-dominated legislature. Some of the inequities are almost incredible. For example, just taking Dade County and Broward County as typical examples, you see here that for every dollar that we send in for gasoline tax that we collect here, we get back 20 cents. This includes Dade and Broward and similar situated counties. While other counties throughout the state, in other parts of our state, for every dollar that they collect in gasoline taxes, they get back not 20 cents or 26 cents like most of the urban counties in the state, but $4.17. This is wrong. Also, in many of our counties, we have no state parks, we have no state facilities, and yet the growing counties pay such a large proportion of the taxes.
Mr. Rennick, may I comment that here is one area that Mr. High and I agree, and that's on the need and the value of reapportionment. Now, however, I cannot agree that the return of monies proportionally to a county will result through reapportionment, because the legislature meets once every 2 years or 60 days. During that time, they appropriate monies as to fields of service, education, highways, etc. It's the governor and the cabinet, a majority of which have the prevailing rule in the decision as to what geographic areas the state's programs are implemented. As governor, I will see that Dade County gets its fair share, and I will enjoy the cooperation of the other members of the cabinet.
I want to point out the scales may be balanced now, because technically by the format, that was Grotta's time for you, Mayor Burns.
Very well.
Now, a question to both gentlemen. Do you intend to actively support Lyndon Johnson? He's the Democratic nominee for governor, Mr. Hunt.
Yes, I do. As a Democrat, I will support the Democratic ticket. Mr. Lyndon Johnson, I believe, will be the nominee for the Democrats for the presidential nomination.
Mr. Burns.
Mr. Rennick, I have always been a Democrat. I have never supported anyone other than a Democrat, and I certainly will give strong support to the candidacy of Lyndon B. Johnson.
Next question to both men, starting with Mr. Burns. Do you feel the state capital is geographically well located at Tallahassee? Would you, as governor, launch a campaign to change its location to a more centrally located spot such as Orlando?
Well, certainly I don't agree that it is centrally located, but I do agree from a practical standpoint, I do observe that it would be grossly impractical to try to move the state capital. I would move from within the halls of the state capital at Tallahassee the tourist bureau to direct a tourist program, and I would center it right here in Miami or Miami Beach.
Mr. High.
Well, the capital certainly is not centrally located, and yet because of the great amount of taxpayers' money that has gone into the building of the facilities in Tallahassee, it would not be, in my judgment, in the best interest of the taxpayers to scuttle those buildings and to move the capital.
What significance do you gentlemen see in Governor George Wallace's voting record in the northern state primary elections, Mr. High?
The significance that I see is that in most of the primaries that he's gone in, he has gone into states where there has been a distinct lack of popularity on the part of the individual that he has run against. There's no question, however, but what there may be some people who are supporting the philosophy that Mr. Wallace stands for. I do not support the kind of philosophy that calls for police dogs, using billy clubs on the heads of citizens, and even using guns on citizens. And that's the only explanation that I have for that.
Mr. Burns?
I don't think we have to be so dramatic in describing the answer to the question that you propounded. I think that the vote that Governor Wallace is receiving is a barometer that the people are concerned with the changing of the constitutional rights and the changing of the court system in the federal courts, and particularly with respect to right for trial before a jury. I think these are the things that people are basically concerned with, along with the federal government coming in as the general manager and the personnel manager of every business employing 25 or more people.
Mr. High, question to you, sir. Why do you believe that you carried only one county in the first primary, and had you expected more support from the camps of the other 4 candidates?
You mean after the runoff?
Yes.
Well, I don't know that any of us can determine how much support he has from the camps of the candidates who did not win. However, I think that we are getting substantial support from those candidates, and it's evident by the many calls that we're getting each day. I had hoped, as any candidate would, that he would carry as many counties as he can. I am, however, confident that we will win on May the 26th.
Do you have any comment to make on that, Mr. Burns?
Well, I think that the background of 15 years and the clean campaign that I conducted and am still conducting, running on a record of progress, presenting my programs for the people, would attract the followers of the other distinguished gentlemen who were eliminated in the first primary. I know especially the supporters of Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Matthews, Mr. Carl, and Mr. Kelly have in overwhelming numbers joined our camp throughout the state and right here in Dade County. I'm delighted that my long friend, the former mayor, Bob Floyd, who was very active for Mr. Dickinson, is now taking a very prominent role in my behalf.
Mr. Burns, a question to you, sir. Were you surprised at the outcome of the first primary? In other words, did you expect Mr. High to be your opponent in the runoff?
I did. I expected Mr. High to be in the runoff, and I so informed him nearly 3 weeks before the election. I also missed the guess on our vote by about 12,000. I anticipated about 300,000. In the latter days of the campaign, we wound up with 312,000, for which I'm most grateful.
What is your position of you gentlemen on the creation of a cabinet post for the chairman of the Florida Development Commission to give more emphasis to tourism and industry? Mr. High.
I'm not sure that I would, at this time, want to make a cabinet post out of this particular department. I do feel that the two should be separate and apart. That is, the tourism section of the Florida Development Commission and the industry section. But I have no feeling at this time that this would be a proper position for this post.
Mr. Burns?
I would recommend to the legislature and hope they would follow and join me in a move to take the Tourist Development Bureau out of the Development Commission. I would not put it in the state hotel or motel